With 71 operators in Siege right now, there are a few operators people either forgot about or completely misunderstand, which is why in today's video, I'll be going over the 10 most underrated operators in Siege right now. Starting off, we have Grim. Now, Grim is starting to rise in popularity a bit after everybody's been using him in Pro League, with the Year 9 Season 1 season finally coming out. With this season, people are starting to play a little bit more fast-paced on the attack because it's seemingly the only way that we can defeat the defender-sided meta that we're in, which consists of Fenrir, Zami, Turbo Arcade Tricks, and many other super strong defensive operators that attackers really can't compete against. Grim is very good at countering a lot of these plays if you have a coordinated stack that is willing to go against it. But also, he's just a really good solo queue operator. He has ACOGs on a good gun with hard reaching charges or EMP grenades, and a bailiff to be able to make soft holes. Also, they buffed his ability to where it's not as clunky, so Grim right now is a really good operator if you can use Grim in the right scenarios. Not to mention, there are a lot of plays that you can substitute Grim for Capitao in. If you know a good Capitao strat, chances are you also know a good Grim strat. So if you don't know how to play Grim, there's a good rule of thumb for you. Grim right now, because of how bad he was of an operator a very long time ago, has a bad rep for being an operator right now. But if you take away your past biases aside and you look at what he is today, I guarantee you he is a very, very good operator in most people's eyes if you know how to play him correctly, which is why he is one of the most underrated operators in this list. Quick little side note, I didn't order these operators in any particular way. It's just a top 10 list. The next operator is going to be Sens. Now, a lot of people think that Sens is one of the worst operators in the game, and I'm not necessarily going to disagree with you on that point, but I think one of the biggest things that made Sens such a bad operator was the fact that you didn't know where the Sens gadget was going to go. But when you play Sens now, after the Year 9 update, you have visible throw trajectory, which allows you to see exactly where your gadget is going to go, which completely eliminates the one massive issue that Sens had as an operator. So because of the fact that you couldn't see where the Sens gadget was going to go, people thought Sens was a terrible operator. But now that that's not an issue, obviously, logically speaking, Sens wouldn't be that bad of an operator. Again, we're talking about fast plant scenarios, right? Because of how Pro League is attacking, sometimes they're bringing Sens for fast smoke plant, and a lot more than they used to. So I think people are going to start playing Sens a lot more because the ranked meta takes away from the Pro League meta a lot right now. So Sens, at least in my book, is a huge underrated operator that I've been playing a lot on stream, twitch.tv, Alka FPS by the way, that I've been getting a lot of success out of. And if I can do it, I guarantee you can too. Someone else I've been playing a lot on stream is Alibi, who I think is pretty underrated right now. Now, Alibi doesn't have any crazy scopes on her, and she doesn't have a deployable shield anymore, but something Alibi does have is observation blockers. There are some strats situationally that you can use observation blockers in front of your Alibi clones to get free kills off of. If you have an observation blocker in front of your Alibi clone and somebody shoots your Alibi clone because they couldn't drone it out, therefore they're more likely to fall for it, then you can swing off of that Alibi clone and get a free kill. The observation blockers specifically not only make it to where they can't drone out you, but again, they cannot drone out your Alibi clones, which makes it to where they're much more likely to actually pre-fire and shoot those Alibi clones, which makes it a lot easier for you to get value out of Alibi. Now, another thing that made Alibi not as played is she doesn't have a good scope, but if you're good with her other primary option, the slug shotgun, she actually does have a good scope. She has every ACOG in the game, right? So you can actually play Alibi in a viable way if you're good at that weapon, or even if you're not good at that weapon and you just run the SMG, observation blockers situationally on certain maps can actually be a viable strategy that I think is very, very underrated with Alibi as an operator specifically. So if you haven't tried it out, you definitely should after this video. Something else you should try out is Finka, who I think is one of the arguably the most underrated attacker in the game right now. Now, Finka used to be a terrible operator on release, not nearly as good compared to Lion, which is another reason people didn't play her. Not only this, but she became very, very good once people realized the potential of her frag grenades and they started using her LMG. When the LMG meta was a thing, people were using Zofia, people were using Finka, and Finka was fully realized of how good of an operator she was. But it wasn't really the frag grenades, it wasn't really the scope that made her good. She still has that amazing LMG, and with LMGs getting buffed this season, even after the movement nerf. It makes it a lot easier to play her LMG, especially with the fact that you can equip the 1x scope, which is pretty good right now. It makes the recoil a lot easier to control as well. I personally only run the 1x scopes. I'm terrible with ACOGs, so the LMG on Finka is really easy for me to control. Not only this, but if you're entry fragging with Finka, which you should have been doing this entire time, she also brings flash grenades, which is the most powerful tool right now that an entry fragger can have. And because of the frag grenade nerf, Finka doesn't even need frag grenades to become viable. So every possible thing that she needed to be viable doesn't actually exist in the game anymore, which means she's much more viable than certain operators who relied on those scopes, on those frag grenades, or on those specific metas. So Finka right now I think is highly underrated, and I've been having a lot of success with her in my games. Just like I've been having a lot of success with Ying. Ying, I think, also is one of the most underrated operators in the game, for the specific exact reason that Grim is also an underrated operator. Pro League players right now are using Ying more than I've ever seen Ying be played, aside from Canadian and how much he used him in his Pro League career. Because again, right now, after the shield rework, people are just running Monty, Grim, and Ying, and they're just rushing the bomb and getting smoke plants down in Pro League, or at least the Pro League teams that are winning. The reason they're doing that is because it seems to be the only way, again, to counter the Izami, to counter the Fenrir, and to counter the Turbo K trick and the Valkyrie on their team. Not only this, but again, Ying has an LMG. You can run the 1x scope if you're afraid of the recoil, but that's the thing. Ying's LMG doesn't actually have any recoil that's noteworthy enough to not run the ACOG on. She also brings smoke grenades, which further reinforces her plant-heavy playstyle. But if you want to utilize the smoke grenades for plant and there's ADSs in the way, you have 4 Ying Candelas. Something else I didn't even know is if you actually deploy the Ying Candela before it gets hit by the ADS, the projectiles of the actual blinds coming out of the Ying Candela count as 1 projectile each for the ADS to catch, meaning you only actually need 1 Ying Candela if placed perfectly to counter 3 ADSs. Kind of insane. Not only this, but you can use Ying vertically. If you know you have a Ram and you're playing vertically, maybe a Buck or a Damos with a shotgun, all of these operators are very popular in ranked right now. You can get a Ying Candela and shoot it through the floor to blind anybody so that your Ram, Buck, or Damos with a shotgun can easily clean up the kill. So not only is it meta in Pro League, but it's also meta in ranked. Not only this, but when I play Ying all the time, and it gets me a lot of value. The issue with a lot of Ying players is they're scared of a Warden, but with Warden losing the 1.5 times scope, that's not really an issue. Not to mention, Warden players are way too aggressive, they're often roaming all the time, and they get killed a lot more often than they actually use their ability. So I'm never really worried when I go against a Warden player as a Ying, and that shouldn't be a viable excuse for you to counter out of being a great operator either. She also brings hard reaching charges if you want to get hatches open, specifically hatches like the meeting hatch on Oregon, where you need flashes to drop pillar anyway. So she's very cohesive with her secondary utility. Even the smokes that we talked about earlier, she has a very powerful primary gadget and a very powerful primary weapon, which is why I think she's one of the most underrated operators, especially if you're looking to play ranked. Something else that is very underrated is people's hardware, which I think definitely needs an increase, which is what brings me into today's sponsor, Wooting. Wooting is a keyboard company specifically, and I recently just partnered with them to get their Wooting 60HE, which is the best gaming keyboard on the market, hands down. I've been having this opinion before I even partnered with them, right? I actually partnered with them and I reached out to them because I thought this keyboard was so good. If you don't believe me, almost every single professional player on every single game, Valorant, Rainbow Six Siege, Overwatch, even Osu players love this keyboard because there's a specific thing that this keyboard can do that most other keyboards can't. And that is setting your actuation points on your keys. So as you can see, I have my keyboard right here. It's set to a specific setting that I have, a digital profile, if you will, called my Rainbow Six Siege profile. Essentially, this means that every single key on my keyboard, I can set to a specific setting if I want it to immediately activate the second I touch my key, or if I want it to activate if I have to press my key all the way down. For example, right now, I have my movement keys set to 1.0 milliseconds, which is some of the fastest actuation settings that you can get on a key. So even if I touch my key a little bit on my W key, I'm gonna move forward, right? Which just makes moving easier, especially if you're going for quick peeks, sudden movements, jiggle peeks, knife peeking, whatever it may be. Being able to have my keys activate the second I even touch them or a piece of dust falls on the key is really nice if you want to be able to move. Also, you can see my Q and E buttons are set to 0.4, which is is even faster than my W, A, S, and D keys, which means when I'm quick peeking, it is so much faster than if I do it on a normal regular keyboard. And it's something that's even noticeable. When I streamed the other day and I got this keyboard, I was like, oh my god, I have to kind of relearn how to quick peek, because I was able to quick peek so much faster and just easier due to the fact that I could just set my keys up in a different way. This is something that is like completely game breaking, which is why half of the pros that you watch in any pro league setting use this keyboard. It's a very, very, very good keyboard. As you can see, the actuation speed of my actual keys right now, because I have tachyon mode enabled, is 1 millisecond. That's the speed of my monitor. That's a fast keyboard. Not only this, but like just look at it. It's so good. I'm gonna get y'all a little listen too. Just listen to the sound. My sticky keys enabled. But you get the idea. It's a really, really nice sounding keyboard. It looks good. And if you think it doesn't look good right now, you can change the color of it too, right? You can change it to whatever you want. You can change the speed of it. It has its own software that you download for free off the internet. It takes absolutely zero space. You can get the exact hex code of colors that you want. It's absolutely crazy, right? But you can set your own profiles. Right now, I'm on my Rainbow Six Siege profile, but when I play GTA, I want to be able to have a GTA profile, because these keys allow you to do something else that's crazy, which is if I want to drive a car in GTA, the speed of the car can depend on how far I'm pressing down my keys. So if I'm just lightly pressing down the key, my car goes slow. But if I'm pressing it down all the way, my car is going to go fast. It's just a crazy keyboard, not only for Siege and Pro League people, but for any game. So if you want a really, really, really good keyboard, check out Wu-Ting, specifically the 60HE model. And with that out of the way, let's get back into the video, where the next most underrated operator in Rainbow Six Siege is going to be Castle. Now, the higher elo that you're in and the more game sense that you have, naturally Castle is going to become more and more effective, which is why more and more people at higher elo don't think that Castle is underrated. So you might be going to the comments of this video being like, Castle's not underrated, I main him and play him every single round. Trust me, I do too, I get it. But for the people who don't play Castle or think he is an overrated or bad operator, let me explain why he is so good. If you have a site like Bathroom and Tellers on Border, where they can easily get the vert for that site and there's nothing you can do about it, being able to play Castle so you can safely extend into Workshop and not actually have to die to vert is very, very nice. Or let's say you're playing a site like Top Floor Bank, where there's a lot of windows. Being able to castle off certain windows so they can't get angles unless they use utility is very nice. Or if you want to bunker strat and you know no one is roaming because you're in a 5-stack, being able to have castle barricades to slow them down is very, very nice. But that's not the main purpose of Castle. The main purpose of Castle is to be able to extend the bomb site to make it a lot easier for you to roam in places where you wouldn't be able to roam so that you can get back to site safely. Now you might be saying, well, Sledge can easily counter this. Breaching charges can easily counter this. Well, if they're doing that, they're wasting time and they're wasting utility on castle barricades, which is nice because that means they're not wasting utility on other things. If you have a Callie who wastes all 4 charges on a castle barricade, she doesn't have any left for a zombie, she doesn't have any left for barbed wire, for Fenrir, or for Miras, right? So not only does it waste time, not only does it allow you to extend and roam onto sites, but it also makes it to where you're wasting a lot of utility if they decide to destroy it. Even if they don't have utility to destroy it, which you'd be surprised a lot of the times they don't bring, they have to melee it 9 times, which wastes a lot of time. In a meta where you want to be wasting a lot of time because people are rushing, Castle can be a very good operator if you specifically know how to play him correctly. Now, I'm going to reiterate that. You specifically need to know how to play him correctly, because if you don't, you can actually be a detriment to your team more than you help your team. Let me explain. If you castle barricade a doorway on site, but you have a roamer offsite, whether it be a cav, a vigil, whatever, they no longer can get back to site safely. If they try to take down your castle barricade, it makes noise, it wastes time, and they can get shot in the back. You never want to do this. There's some sites too where you can't really put any castle barricades and it be useful. So Castle is pretty situational, but if you know how to play them in those situational places, Castle can be one of the most powerful operators that you're able to play on the defense. Someone else that takes way less skill to be much, much more powerful is Monty. I think Monty right now is the most underrated operator in the entire game out of anybody on this list, yes, even more than Finka. Now, there are people who don't think Monty is good. Now, I think specifically if you're trying to get better at the game, you shouldn't play Monty, because again, he doesn't take much skill to get much usefulness out of him. But if you're somebody who gives comms, Monty's very powerful, because you can just stick your shield in a room and sit in a room and give constant callouts. You can be like, there's a guy in a rotate, he's standing, he's crouched, he rotated to vase, he's in vase now, he's peeking you, he's wide swinging. You get all of that information while still being able to be there. Not only that, but if you have a coordinated team who's opening a wall, who's actively shooting a player, you can then unshield and then shoot that player. So if they turn around to shoot you, your teammate kills them. Or if they try to kill your teammate, you can kill them. Either way, you're taking a 2v1, which is a guaranteed kill and a guaranteed 1 gunfight versus a 1v1, which is much harder. Not only this, but Monty is a lot scarier right now because he can run at you without putting his shield on his side, meaning you cannot shoot him unless you're shooting him in the feet. But if you're shooting him in the feet, then you're going to get shot behind. So it's very, very hard to deal with Monty right now. He also has smoke grenades for the plant. So if you want to protect somebody who's planting or plant with a shield behind your back with smoke grenades, you can do so. And the last thing people expect you to do when you're playing Monty is ADS people, which is why the best Monty players in the world, people like me, people like Kudos, are people who are really in Pro League and in the high ranked lobbies, just ADS a bunch with Monty, because 1, you have to hit the head, which is kind of hard to do with a Monty player, but 2, no one expects you to be ADS as a Monty, so you'll get a lot of free kills from people who aren't even looking at you. So if you want a lot of free kills and you want an operator that's very, very fun to play, I definitely recommend you start playing Monty. Somebody who is great for countering that Monty smoke plant, though, is Warden. I think Warden is actually pretty underrated. He doesn't have a 1.5 times scope, which is what people were actually using him for before, but I think actually as a piece of utility, Warden is actually kind of useful right now. Because of the fact that, like I said, people are bringing Monty, they're bringing Ying, and they're bringing Smokes, and they're bringing Grim, the best person to counter this on some specific sites can actually be a good placed Warden if you're using his ability. Not only this, but again, you have the Nitro Cell to also help deny your plant. You have a shield to help you deny their plant as well. So if you're going against a team that is heavily planting by playing the operators that I mentioned earlier, you can actually play a Warden and use his ability, not his gun, his ability to actually counter their push. Right now, I think Warden is in the healthiest state he's ever been. People are only picking him for his utility rather than picking him for his gun. Again, I'm going to highlight the fact that Pro League players are playing him. Pro League is an exceptional way to learn what the meta is going to be in ranked in a season or two. People are just sticking Warden on defense right now a lot of rounds because they're expecting smoke plants due to the fact that that's what people are doing now. So I think Warden in this coming season, maybe year 9, season 2, season 3, Warden is going to start being played a lot more once people are smoke planting a lot more. So I think you should build the habit and the muscle of learning how to become a good Warden player now while he's still underrated, so that you can become a good and reliable Warden player in the future when he is meta. Someone else that is definitely getting a resurgence in the meta right now is Vigil. Vigil, I think, is actually pretty underrated because in most of your ranked games, you have the 2 most common bans, Jackal and Dokkaebi. These are the only 2 roam clear operators that can counter Vigil. So naturally, if the 2 people that can counter you are gone, you're an uncounterable operator. The only roam clearers left that can counter you are Deimos and Lion. But Lion, you can activate your ability and his scans are negated. And then when Deimos tracks you, you can activate your ability and his ability is negated. So if you see your brain dead teammates and enemies just auto-picking Jackal and Dokkaebi on their bans, you can easily play Jackal and become an uncounterable roamer. The same thing can be said for Solus, but I guarantee you Solus is either banned or being played by one of your teammates, so I think Vigil is a pretty underrated operator right now. Not only this, but I've been saying this for a year straight. The Boss G is the most underrated gun in Rainbow Six Siege. If you like ACOGs and you like being able to hold long angles with DMRs, I think the Boss G is amazing because it will actually one-shot every single armor class in the game. It does 125 damage to the body. To the body. That is enough to down 3 armors. It's crazy. It's just a great gun, right? So you can not only use it as a close range shotgun, you can also use it as a long range DMR that you can hold angles with because you have an ACOG. Not only this, but you can't get droned out, which is huge. You also have impacts, which is great for a roamer. So I think Vigil is very underrated right now. Even if you don't play the Boss G and you play the K1A, I think Vigil is a great operator. Someone else who is a great operator that you might not think is underrated, but I think is a tad bit underrated, is Flores, who is the 10th and final operator on this list. Now, Flores is underrated in the sense that people could play him every single round and get usefulness out of him. Not only this, but he fits the current defender meta. Like I said, there's a lot of barbed wire, there's a lot of Azami, there's a lot of Fenrir, there's a lot of deployable shields. built. Flores can counter all of these operators. The only issue is mute. But if you have EMPs, if you have a teammate that can shoot a mute jammer, if you go below and you shoot the mute jammer, or if you just hop over the radius of the mute jammer, it's not that hard. Not to mention, if you master the art of moving around your Flores drone, a lot of the times you can get your Flores drone into the building without ever having to worry about a mute jammer. So I think Flores is really good in the sense that he's not really that counterable if you know how to play him correctly, but also he counters some of the most powerful operators in the game right now, which is why I think he needs to be played more often. I think he's situational in the fact that you can only really play him if there's operators to counter, but those operators, like I said, Azami and Fenrir, are being played every single round. So yeah, he's situational, but like, come on, they're gonna play him every single round, so you should be playing Flores every single round. Now, just in case there were some operators that you wanted to see on this list that didn't quite make the cut, I have an honorable mentions list right here. The first of which being Blitz. Now, Blitz is underrated for the same reasons that Monty is underrated, but I think Blitz is just a bit worse of a version of Monty, because you can still get shot in the feet, and your really only good ability is the fact that you can run at people, right? But if you're running at people, people shoot you in the feet. The only actual good Blitz players that I've gone against are Blitz players that ADS, right? But then again, you can do that exact same thing on Monty. Not only this, but people really misunderstand how far Blitz's flashes go. You can only actually flash people with Blitz if they're 8 meters or less away from you. That is not a lot of distance. Not only that, but that's the max range, which means the flash, even from that flash, is not going to last that long. The maximum amount of flash time that you can get out of Blitz is from 4 meters away. So you have to get up and close and personal to the operator before you can even flash him in the first place. And even then, you'll get pre-fired, right? So you might as well play Monty, who can extend the shield and just shoot him and knife him really easily. So I don't think Blitz really is that underrated. I don't think he's really that good, to be honest. There's some really good Blitz players out there, but even then, they could do the exact same thing on Monty and be more useful to their team. Next up is Fuse. Now, these past few seasons, people have been saying that Fuse is the most underrated operator in the game right now, and I heavily disagree, because there's a fundamental problem with Fuse as an operator, and that's the fact that you have to be playing him vertically, you have to have utility for him to counter, kind of like Flores, and you have to know exact lineups, and you have to know his gadget for him to be useful. Not only that, but if you're going to play vertically with Fuse, which is the only actually viable place that you can play him, you have to roam clear, and if you're solo queuing at ranked, your teammates aren't roam clearing. The biggest actual way to counter Fuse is by flanking, and it's the easiest way, and it's the way that most people die as Fuse, which is to a flank. I used to be one of those people that said Fuse is the most underrated operator in the game because he has 2 of the best guns in the game, he has hard reaching charges, he has 20 grenades that can counter all sorts of utility, but here's the thing, they can just shoot your fucking Fuse charges, they can just shoot them. Not only this, but a lot of Fuse players don't know the exact coordinates at which their Fuse grenades are going to go. You rarely get kills with Fuse either. So the higher lobbies that you're in, Fuse becomes less and less useful because you can literally just shoot the Fuse charges. So I don't think he's underrated. I think he's honestly a little bit overrated right now, in my opinion. Next up is Melusi. Now, Melusi actually is a bit underrated, but she does have an ACOG. The only reason I don't really want to put Melusi in the underrated list is because people are actually starting to play a lot of Melusi, and she's becoming less and less underrated right now because of her ACOG, right? And because Fenrir is banned so often, and she's kind of just a worse version of Fenrir. So the reason I'm not putting her in the top 10 is because, honestly, she's not really as underrated as she once was. She's starting to actually get the hype about her. Next up is Capitao. Capitao is an honorable mention and not a top 10 because the reason that Capitao is underrated isn't because he's actually underrated. People don't play Capitao not because he's a bad operator, but because they genuinely just forget that he exists as an operator. And even then, he's really situational, kind of like Castle. So you can't really play him that often because there's better operators to play a lot of the times. And even then, you kind of forget he's an operator because you have operators that do his job better, like Grim and like Ying. So he's not really underrated. People just don't really remember that he exists as an operator. And then for the final honorable mention on this list, we're going to go over Echo. I think Echo right now is just a worse version of Maestro because Maestro got a 3rd camera. I am arguably one of the best Echo players in this entire game. I have so many videos on Echo lineups. I think out of anybody in the game, I've spent the most amount of time making Echo lineups. I can confidently say that. I have at least 30 Echo lineups and spots and hidden places for cameras for every single map in the game, just because I think Echo is fun to play. And even then, I'm saying that Echo is not actually worth the hype, right? He's not that good. very situational. You have to have the team composition for him to actually make sense. You have to be on the map for him to make sense. You have to have the teammates that can swing off of your echo cameras for him to make sense. He also just lost the 1.5 and your default to a suppressor, which makes the recoil a tad bit harder to control. So I think Echo right now just isn't seeing the time of day. I think Maestro is just a better version of him, and until they buff Echo in some slight way by giving him more stuns or a third camera, I just don't think Echo is going to be that good of an operator. But with that out of the way, that is it for today's video. Check out this next video. Join the Discord down below if you want free coaching and you want to see me go live. My name's Alka, and I'll see you in the next video. Later.